whatever you do, they all helped raise and sell vegetables and found a variety of other jobs to contribute to the household expenses. That's what they did. Okay, they worked. Okay, they went to school and worked. They helped raise and sell vegetables to sell, and they found a variety of other odd jobs, and they contributed to the household expenses of the Eisenhower family. Dwight was very popular with his classmates when he grew up. They gave him the nickname Little Ike. Little Ike. Dwight was very popular with his classmates growing up in school, and they gave him the nickname Little Ike. Anybody know why he got that name? Why wasn't he Big Ike?
He was small.
No, because he had an older brother, Edgar, and that's how they used to determine the difference between the two. One was called Ike and one was called Little Ike. Big Ike, actually, is what they called Edgar. But they called him Little Ike to distinguish him from his older brother, Edgar, who was also very popular. They referred to him as Big Ike and Dwight as Little Ike. Now, do you guys still do this in your annuals, most likely, or do they do prophecies of what you're going to be when you grow up? They used to do that when I was in school. You know, they'd say, you know, Taylor Falfer is going to grow up and be the first world champion women's prom crier, or something like that.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh, sorry, Michaela. Okay. Anyway, I do that once. So I got to get a tally board up here for you. That's twice, isn't it? Okay. That's twice. God. Anyway, so they used to do that in yearbooks. They don't do that anymore. Predict what you're going to be. Well, anyway, during those days, Dwight's high school yearbook projected that he was going to become a history professor. That's what they projected that he was going to be. Guess what they predicted his older brother was going to be? President of the United States. Very good. So Dwight's high school yearbook projected that he was to become a history professor and his older brother Edgar would become President of the United States. You know what Dwight did year after graduating from high school? He couldn't afford to send himself to college. You know what he did? He worked full-time at this creamery that his dad worked at and took the money and paid his older brother's first-year college expenses. Now, would you do that for your sister Sadie there, Casey? Would you work and pay her first-year college expenses? That's what he did. He worked in a creamery. He couldn't afford to go to college himself. Family couldn't afford to send, my God, 2 boys to college at the same time. Edgar's going to be the guy. So Dwight stayed home and worked in this creamery and helped pay Edgar's first-year college expenses. Now, he couldn't afford to go to college, so how was he going to get any more education? He was going to apply to the military academies. Okay? He was going to apply to the try to get an appointment to a military academy. And what do you need to do that? You need. It's not what you know, it's who you know lots of times. So he received some help from Senator Joseph Brostow of Kansas. Senator Joseph Brostow of Kansas helped Dwight try to get a military appointment. And Dwight wanted to go to West Point. And Senator Brostow spoke in behalf of Dwight, and it helped him earn acceptance to West Point. So Dwight Eisenhower will go to West Point, mainly because of the push from Kansas Senator Joseph Brostow. Eisenhower played on the football team at West Point until a knee injury ended his career. And he graduated from West Point in 1950. 1950. So he played on the football team at West Point until a knee injury ended his career, eventually graduating from West Point in 1915, ranked 61 out of 164. Ranked 61 out of 164. Now what do you leave the military academy with? An officer's rank. That's why you go there. And his rank, when he left West Point, was 2nd lieutenant. LT period would probably work for that. 2nd lieutenant. Well, on July 1st, 1916, Dwight married the former Mamie Dowd, and the couple eventually had 2 sons. On July 1st, 1916, Dwight married the former Mamie Dowd, and the couple eventually had 2 sons. Firstborn son was Dowd David Eisenhower. Dowd David Eisenhower. Sadly, he died of scarlet fever at the age of 3. Dowd David Eisenhower died of scarlet fever at the age of 3. Second born was John Sheldon Eisenhower. He later became an Army officer himself and a diplomat. John Sheldon Eisenhower became an Army officer and diplomat, but he's better known for his marriage. Anybody want to guess who he married? Well, he married Julie Nixon, President Nixon's daughter, and they were married in the White House. That was kind of a big deal. So John Sheldon Eisenhower became an Army officer and diplomat. He would eventually marry Julie Nixon, President Nixon's daughter, in a White House ceremony, which was a big deal. Well, what did he do from 1916 until 1948, Eisenhower? Served in the military, in the Army, right? And I'm going to give you 7 important events that happened to him from the time he started in 1916 until he ended his career in 1948. Okay? 7 things that happened to Eisenhower during the time that he was in the military. In 1933, he became an aide to General Douglas MacArthur. In 1933, he became an aide to General Douglas MacArthur. They were lifelong friends, and probably another reason why he took him to Korea. In 1933, he became an aide to General Douglas MacArthur. Number 2, just prior to the start of World War II, he was given his own command of the 3rd Army. Just before the start of World War II, Eisenhower was given the command of the 3rd Army. Number 3, in March of 1942, he was promoted to Major General. He was promoted to Major General in March of 1942. Shortly afterwards, number 4, in June of 1942, he was named Commanding General of all U.S. forces in the European theater of World War II. Number 4, in June of 1942, Eisenhower was named Commanding General of all U.S. forces in the European theater of World War II. Number 5, in 1943, he masterminded Operation Overlord. In 1943, he masterminded Operation Overlord. What was that, Delaney? It was the invasion of France at Normandy, which happened on June 6, 1944. So in 1943, what was he doing? Putting this thing together. Okay? Not a girl. Number 6, in December of 1944, he was promoted to 5-star general. 5-star general. We haven't had a 5-star general since MacArthur. You know that? In December of 1944, Eisenhower was promoted to 5-star general. And what did he do in 1948, probably? Since that's the end of his career, he retired from active military duty. So in 1948, he retired from active duty. You know what his first job was after he retired from the military? Take a look at your ID sheet and see if you can figure out. What's his first job? Close. Where? He served as president of Columbia University. I'm curious, I'm going to text Chantel Barr today, who is attending Columbia, and see if she can find any statue or any plaque or anything that signifies his presidency. So after his retirement from the military, he became president of Columbia University, which is located in New York City. During his time as president at Columbia University, he wrote a book entitled Crusade in Europe, a personal account of World War II. While serving as president of Columbia University, he wrote a book entitled Crusade in Europe. His personal commentary on World War II. Now, I want to tell you something prior to the election of 1952. He was not quick to commit himself as a presidential candidate. You know why? Anybody know why he didn't commit himself as a presidential candidate in 52? Any guess? He didn't belong to any political party. He didn't belong to any political party. He wasn't a Republican, he wasn't a Democrat, he wasn't anything. And so he was very reluctant to commit because he didn't know what party he would represent. Now, this gives you an example of his dignity and honor. There was a very famous magazine in the 50s called McCall's Magazine. You ever heard of it? I don't know if it's still in circulation around. I think it's kind of a women's magazine, to be honest with you. But they offered him in 1952 $40,000 if he would just state in their magazine that he was a Republican. All you have to do is say you're a Republican and let us print it in our magazine and we'll give you $40,000. And he refused. He had too much dignity and honor. He turned down $40,000 from McCall's magazine just to state that he was a member of the Republican Party in their publication. $40,000 is a lot of money in 1952. Well, he kept getting kind of hounded about running for president, and finally he made this quote concerning the presidency. He said, quote, "Perhaps a soldier's duty might include service in the White House." He said, perhaps a soldier's duty might include service in the White House. Well, you don't have to write this down. We know that he went on to be nominated by the Republican Party, and he was elected in 1952, right? You will find out too, and you don't have to write it down now, he will be re-elected in 1956. He will serve 2 terms. And he'll become the first person in American history whose term of office is limited by the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution. He could have run for a 3rd without doubt, and more than likely won. But he was the first president to be limited by the 22nd Amendment of the United States Constitution. Well, he leaves office in January of 1961, and he retired to his farm, ironically, which was located in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So he owned a farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. How appropriate for a president to have a farm there. President Eisenhower left office in January of 1961 and retired to his farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. What did he do during his retirement? He raised cattle and wrote 3 books of his memoirs. During his retirement, he raised cattle on his farm in Gettysburg and wrote 3 books on his memoirs. Eisenhower had had a history of heart problems, which we'll talk about later. And unfortunately, on March 28, 1969, he died. He had a history of heart problems, and on March 28 of 1969, he died of heart failure. Where is he buried? Anybody want to guess? What? Nope, there's only 2 presidents buried in Arlington, John Kennedy and William Howard Taft. That's a good guess, though. He's buried, most presidents be buried. Back in their hometown, which was? Actually, it was Abilene, Kansas, and he's buried at his presidential library there, which a lot of presidents are. So he is buried in Abilene, Kansas, where the Dwight D. Eisenhower Presidential Library is located. And Taylor makes a good point. Most people think that all of our presidents are buried in Arlington. There are only 2. Most are buried in their hometowns. Normally, they're buried in the vicinity of their library. Okay, tomorrow we'll talk about Eisenhower's administration, which he will tab as modern republicanism, and we'll move on from there.
I have none.